Tonight on News 5 Live, a state funeral fitting for the late Dr. Dame Minita Gordon. We'll show you all the pomp and ceremony of today's burial. Prime Minister Briceño speaks on the termination of transport employees and the $10 million PUC building purchase. Is an indefinite curfew unconstitutional? The opposition thinks so. Today, the Minister of Home Affairs responds. And a grateful farewell for the Cuban Medical Brigade. Details of these stories and more coming up in tonight's newscast.
Currently, we're using Smart Elite VoIP calling plan. We use
Good evening. Welcome to News 5 Live for Wednesday, January 20th. I am Marlene Cuellar. The principal streets of Belize City were lined with spectators this morning as a funeral procession rarely seen in the history of the country made its way to the Lordridge Cemetery. The cortege and internment of Belize's first Governor General brought to an end 3 days of national mourning. It succeeded an ecumenical service of Thanksgiving led by Bishop Philip Waite at St. John's Cathedral, where the Belize Defense Force showed a great display of ceremonial splendor. Dr. Dame Minita Gordon was laid to rest today in a state funeral. News 5's Isani Caetano reports.
A proper send-off for Dame Minita Gordon, Belize's first Governor General and the first woman to hold such a prestigious office within the Commonwealth of Nations. She was interred at the Lordridge Cemetery at midday during a state funeral that saw all the magnificent ceremonial display afforded to someone of her distinction.
She was an educator. She loved children. I mean, she was an artist. She was like almost like a Renaissance woman, that she did a little of everything, and whatever she did well. We as a nation are grateful for the work that she did for us as a country, that she stepped up to the plate at a very important time in 1981 when we were just declared an independent nation.
Today, Belize bade her farewell as family, friends, government officials and other mourners attended a service of thanksgiving in her honor at St. John's Cathedral. The Belize Defense Force was in full splendor, escorting the body draped in the country's standard, followed by a sword party made up of senior officers marching with their swords in reverse as a sign of reverence. There was also a rifle party and a cannon team, which was responsible for the 21 cannon salute during Dr. Gordon's interment. Hers is only the third funeral of its kind, complete with a flyover by the BDF Air Wing.
She was a brave woman, a strong woman, and she stood up for what is right. And I think we also have to commend the father of the nation to have picked such a stellar woman, such a wonderful woman that can be the first Governor General of Belize.
In remembering the former GG, lifelong friend Stanley Lezama spoke about experiences with her during his boyhood growing up in Belize City.
My family and the Governor General was very close friends, and I used to carry bread and bun for her at her house too, because my grandaunt used to sell bread and bun. And me and she was very close friends. Sometimes we go to the house and we also have a tea party. And when my dad was the mayor in '84, she was the Governor General, and they also invite the Queen of England, so she's very close to my family.
Lezama, a mortician by profession, had the distinct honor of preparing Dr. Gordon for her state funeral. It's an assignment that, for him, was a great privilege.
The older generation knows she well, but the youths of today, they don't know who is Dr. They don't know who is she. I feel great about myself because I also do the Father of the Land to George Kager Prize. So I feel very good to give her last farewell off.
In eulogizing her sister, Kelora Franklin touched on her many accomplishments upon being appointed Governor General in 1981.
Her awards and honors are numerous. In 1981, she was awarded a Certificate of Inclusion in the International Who's Who of Intellectuals from Cambridge, England, for outstanding achievements. In 1982, she received a citation for outstanding and meritorious contributions to the development of Belize. In 1984, she was awarded the Dame Grand Cross of the Most Distinguished Order of St. Michael's and St. George, GCMG, by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. And in 1985, the Queen conferred upon her the title of Dame Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order, GCVO, on the occasion of her visit to Belize.
At her final resting place this afternoon, following her burial, the Belize flag was handed over to the chief mourner, Kelora Franklin, by Governor General Sir Colville Young, in appreciation of service from a grateful nation. Reporting for News 5, I am Isana Cayetano.
The previous Public Utilities Commission's decision to purchase the old Marab building on Northfront Street in 2019 is raising many questions. Under former Chairman John Avery, the PUC purchased the building and its properties for $10.3 million, but they never moved in. Instead, it is presently paying $12,000 monthly for space it rents on Gabriel Lane. The contract agreement signed by Avery is for the building and a nearby property next door to the Belize Insurance Center. While many are questioning whether the PUC received value for money, payment for the building remains outstanding. According to Minister of Public Utilities Rodwell Ferguson, that figure is an estimated $9 million. Prime Minister John Briceño, who admits that the matter just recently came to light, reiterates that legal advice is being sought.
When I got into the department or the Public Utilities Commission to meet the director for the first time, that was shown to me, and I said this is what we call robbing the cradle. The cradle, because the country is in a serious pandemic, we're in a serious financial crisis, and at a time like this, they only see it fit to purchase a building for $10.3 million when Belizeans are suffering.
Have you found out why it is they did not move over? How much is left to be paid on that sale?
Because after the PUC have been misused and abused over the years, and they never had the money to even pay what was due for them to pay, so they're coming to a term of arrangement because the PUC is paying $13,000 a month just for the building that they are renting. So it is difficult for them to even renovate the present structure.
How much is left to be paid?
It's about $9 million, I believe.
Sir, what does the government plan to do with PUC's purchase of the Olmera building?
Well, that has just come to our attention. We have to, I think that the Public Utilities Commission have sent the information to an attorney to study, and then I guess that attorney will then have to give legal advice whether there is a contract that's unbreakable.
On January 15th, the Ministry of Transport terminated 24 employees at the Novelas bus terminal in Belize City. Their dismissal comes at the height of MAGA season, and particularly when job opportunities are hard to come by. According to Minister Rodwell Ferguson, whose responsibilities include oversight of the Transport Department, the decision to let go almost 60 workers was necessary. Many of them are open vote workers hired by the previous minister, and the simple truth, says Ferguson, is that government is strapped for cash.
Those people who voted for me, those who campaigned for me, the expectations are high. And I could say out of those who voted for me in particular, 1/3 is looking for a job. Government not have the job to offer them. One time you could have sent them to the private sector. The private sector don't even have the job to offer them. So I believe right now, about 60 to 65% of Belizeans are unemployed. And it's a pity, it's unfortunate. Mr. Barrow covered all his coffers quite properly. Even those who had contracts, had rotating contracts, but they were all protected. The established workers are protected. And if you can remember what he said in 2008, I'm sorry, I will have to go after the open vote workers. And I think it is, I hope when you recall my interview and play tonight, you can replay what he said in 2008. It is important for the Belizean people. I, who is a human being, and I have a soft heart, it was not my intention, but if I did, I damn. If I don't, I damn. Because my people are expecting me to provide for them. So with that said, I will, I think, answer your questions. Your question.
People may say that this is where a government starts to lose the goodwill of the people, and why would you not take down someone from on top rather than attacking the small people?
Because it's impossible to take them from the top. They are well protected. Okay, they are protected by some bloated contracts. It's a pity that the small people have to go, and I'm a human being, I said, and I can tell you, some of them are already employed because of the passion that I have for them.
With so many unemployed, one of the growing concerns is that it will lead to an increase in crime. In an interview today with the Minister of Home Affairs, Karim Musa, we asked him that very question. Musa quickly noted that the new administration assumed office with 60,000 people already out of work for more than 6 months. He added that he is conscious that unemployment directly impacts crime, which he is tasked to address. So the government is working to stimulate economic activity and tackle the root of the issue moving forward.
We have to, as a government, take an all-encompassing approach. I know that right now, aggressively, we are looking at the tourism industry to bounce back as a cabinet. I know that aggressively we're looking to agriculture, we're looking to the private sector to create employment. Definitely, right now as we speak, it is just the residue of the previous administration. There was already a lot of unemployment. Let us be real. There was over 60,000 people unemployed. This is not something that we just woke up today and there is unemployment. And so we know the situation. We know what the field is like. And so what we're trying to do, because it cannot be government's responsibility to hire everybody. It cannot be. And so there has to be this partnership with the private sector to aggressively encourage them and create that enabling environment to bounce back. And so that is where our focus is. Definitely, it has to weigh on my mind as Minister of Home Affairs that there, with the current climate of over 60,000 people unemployed, that there is a lot of desperation. But I have every confidence in our department. We are handling it as best as we can. But there has to be, going back to what I was saying, this all-encompassing approach as a government, that we cannot fight crime without first fighting poverty.
Meanwhile, in responding to the terminations at the Ministry of Transport, Prime Minister John Briceño also spoke on the general issue of employment in these times of austerity, where there simply aren't many jobs to offer.
On the issue of the people that have been let go in the bus terminals, as I am told, many of those people were just put there by the previous minister. Many of them were just there as just like a placeholder. Many of them were not even working. Many of them did not even qualify for the post that they were given. They were simply given a post because they serve or support the former Minister of Transport. And we need to put in people that can do the work, one, but people also, just as important, that people that are prepared to cooperate with the government. In many instances, we have a lot of people within government, because they pledge allegiance to the previous government or to the UDP, they do any and everything to undermine the work of the government. And many of these people, we saw this happening, and so it was felt that in the interest of the bus industry and to be able to provide proper service to the public, that they had to be released.
Sure, we're being told, though, that for every person you were letting off, you're bringing on a whole lot more. Can that be afforded?
I don't know. I would dispute that we're bringing in a lot more, because we're not bringing in a lot more. We have been very tight in the people that we've been hiring because we are in a bad financial state.
New COVID-19 regulations are coming. What does this mean for the curfew? We'll tell you when we come back. The number of new cases of COVID-19 in Belize appears to be on the decline. Today, the Ministry of Health reported 27 new cases and 3 new deaths, and a total of 445 active cases. And while those numbers appear promising, Belizeans are growing wary of restrictions that remain in place. Prime Minister John Brisenian today summarized the efforts this administration has taken to curb the virus's spread. As for the restriction of movement after 8 p.m., the Prime Minister says we must hold on just a little bit longer.
Well, I think what was very important is that for us, that as a new government, to ensure that everyone is on board when it comes to fighting COVID and to try to flatten the curve and control the spread. When we got into government, before we got into government in October, the infection rates was over 5,000. Now we've managed to bring it down in 2 months' time to about 500. But that was done because we had a plan. We said that we were going to follow the science and that we are going to follow what the doctors and the professionals tells us, not the politicians. So what the Minister of Health did, and Wellness, the Minister of Health and Wellness, Minister Shabat, he set up a whole team of doctors and nurses that work not only within the government system, but also the private doctors and from the private clinics. As what we said all along, all of us are in this thing together, so we brought in the private doctors, the private clinics, the private labs, everybody on board to be able to fight, to control COVID. But secondly, we realize is that you can't be putting up an SI today and then 2 weeks later that finish and then you bring it up and you have this sort of uncertainty. So what we did is to set up, the SI that we set up is almost like open-ended. If we wanted to just say, okay, declare like victory, we could have already lifted the curfew, and say, okay, we don't win. But it's not just about political victory, it is about protecting the lives of our citizens. And so we felt that we need to hold it on a little bit longer so that whenever we remove the restrictions, it's not going to flare up again, 1 month later or a few weeks later.
As for the COVID-19 regulations outlined in December's statutory instrument, the Minister of Health had already confirmed that new regulations will be coming at the start of February. So what kind of changes can we expect? We asked Minister of Home Affairs, Karim Musa. Musa said the details are still being ironed out, but the curfew hours are certainly being considered. Here's how he explains it.
When we introduced the SI last month, and we made it very clear then that it would be an indefinite SI, we thought it necessary whenever we are presenting regulations that we cannot do so in a piecemeal manner. It has to be a very comprehensive SI that includes all regulations, and so that SI currently is still in place. I know that there is a huge misconception out there that perhaps the SI had an expiration date when in fact it did not. But what I can assure the public is that the Ministry of Health and its task force has been reviewing the regulations, and towards the ending of the month, which is next week, towards the end of next week, starting on February 1st, we will see an adjustment in these regulations. That might not necessarily mean a lifting of the curfew, but maybe an adjustment in the curfew. I think that is the #1 concern out there, particularly for the restaurant owners. They would want to see an adjustment made because they find that 8 o'clock is too early in order to serve their customers. And so we are looking at that. While it is that I hear the anxiety and the build-up and the clamor now because our numbers have been going down for us to reopen, we have to consider and we have to give ourselves a pat on the back for coming this far, that we were able to make it through December, make it through New Year's without a huge spike. And so we did not lock down.
On the curfew topic, today Minister Musa responded to the opposition, the United Democratic Party, who issued a release last week calling for a revision of the current health protocols. The UDP release said, quote, that this was the first time a curfew has been implemented without declaring a state of emergency, which at the least makes it arguably unconstitutional, unquote. The release added that, quote, it is also the first time a curfew has been put into effect without an end date, unquote. Today, Minister Musa scolded the opposition and questioned the source of their legal advice. Musa says the regulations are within the law as they were drawn from the Public Health Act.
They condemn these regulations, this statutory instrument, and refer to it as being unconstitutional. I don't know where they're getting their legal advice, but clearly it appears the opposition, UDP, is in a very discombobulated state, that they're now grabbing on to political straws at a time when the country needs us to be very united in this effort to fight this pandemic, to fight coronavirus. And so they're attacking this, even though they're also the ones who had imposed curfews as well. But it is, in my opinion, grabbing at straws for cheap political mileage, and it is going to be to their own demise because people are appreciating the results that we are getting. They only need to turn to their Public Health Act. Open their Public Health Act, look at Section 83(1)(e), I believe, which authorizes the DHS from time to time to present regulations, to pass statutory instruments such as the one we passed in December for the prevention of the spread of infectious diseases. It says it right there. So I don't know why they're now coming and saying this is unconstitutional. That is a completely untenable position. If you recall, when the previous government was imposing this state of emergency, I believe they were using the quarantine regulation, the Quarantine Act. It was at a time where they were trying to stop crime as well. Crime was out of control, and they were trying to do a dual purpose capture of both the pandemic and the out of control crime situation. And if you recall, they had arrested over 100 individuals from the south side of Belize City under the SOE. But the Public Health Act that I'm referring to makes absolutely no mention of there having to be a state of emergency in order for the Director of Health Services to implement and to present these regulations that are, like I said, in the best interest of the health of our nation.
Musa says that while the last administration used the state of emergency and curfew measures to tackle crime, he wants the public to know that the curfew that is currently in place is solely for COVID-19 containment purposes. And when it comes to the Curzall Free Zone reopening, Minister Musa says the COVID-19 prevention protocols will be stringent and will only allow 1/3 of employees to return to work. As we've reported, Cabinet decided to reopen the free zone on February 1st and formed an interministerial committee to review plans and protocols for the reopening. Part of the readiness includes the hiring of compliance officers to monitor activities in the Curzall Free Zone and the installation of walk-in tunnels, temperature monitor, and rapid testing for anyone showing signs or symptoms of COVID-19. Minister of Home Affairs Carrie Musa sits on that committee.
We had a meeting yesterday. The committee met to discuss the regulations. They are going to be a little more stringent than the normal regulations. And so we have to look at that very carefully, because there's always this tug of war between business and the economy and the health care and the wellness of our people. And so we have to look at those regulations. We have been. There was an initial presentation made by the Ministry of Health yesterday. We are in agreement with all of those regulations, and that will be put to Cabinet next Tuesday for consideration.
Right. Minister, now the new variant of the virus, I think, is already detected in Mexico, and I know there is a lot of concern about that and how that will be managed when it comes to those protocols? Is this being taken into consideration?
Absolutely, absolutely. We, like I said, the restrictions that we're going to be implementing in the free zone have to be extremely stringent. The checks, the monitoring, the oversight has to be very regular. The Ministry of Health will play an active role in overseeing the implementation and constantly monitoring the business taking place within the free zone to ensure that there is full compliance by all businesses, by all patrons to these establishments. And so that's very critical moving forward, because we're looking to as much as 1,000 employees going back to work in the free zone. Initially, it was around 3,000 employees, but we're looking to take about 1/3 of those employees back.
Will the police lay charges against former Minister Rene Montero? That story after the break.
In response to COVID-19, the government of Belize has implemented strict
2020 saw a major reduction in crime across the country. The COVID-19 regulations played a major role in crime reduction. The police commissioner, Chester Williams, disagrees. He says that the reduction of crime for 2020 is due to the hard work of police officers. Hippolyta Novella takes a closer look at the numbers.
Fighting crime is by no means an easy task, and for top cop Chester Williams, the buck stops at him. As Commissioner of Police, Chester Williams is seen as the man who is responsible for reducing crime. He was appointed to the post on January 9, 2019, and today Williams sees his first 2 years in office as a success.
It is a good feeling, and I know that under my leadership we have seen significant reduction in crime, and I'm not going to take all the credit for it. I will applaud the men and women of the Belize Police Department who are always there doing their utmost best to ensure that the mandate of the department is achieved.
Commissioner Williams is right. During his 2 years in office, there seemed to have been a significant decrease in major crimes. Murder, for example, saw a reduction of 23% with 102 murders recorded in 2020 compared to 134 murders recorded in 2019. 32 murders less. The months of April and June recorded 3 murders separately, the least amount of murders for 2020 in any given month. February and March recorded the highest. The Orange Rock District recorded the least number of murders with 3, and the Belize District recorded the highest, 59 murders.
And I can tell you that our most significant decrease was in the Belize District, particularly in San Pedro, which only saw 1 murder in 2020 compared to, I think, over 12 we had in 2019. And we also have in Belize City itself, within the precincts, I think Precinct 4 recorded no murder in 2020. And in 2019, Precinct 4 may have recorded something like 3 or 4 murders. In the Region 1 area, which is known as Southside, there was also a decrease compared to the previous year. And so we are happy with the decrease. Yes, we wanted it to be more, but you know, we cannot control or we cannot prevent every crime from occurring.
But what might have helped in that regard is the COVID-19 pandemic and its effect. Rape, burglary, robbery, theft, and unlawful sexual intercourse, all major crimes, saw a significant decrease in 2020. These crimes typically happened in the night and required the perpetrator to be on the move. But the COVID-19 regulations prohibited movement to an extent, and the curfew prohibited citizens, including the criminals, from being out in public at night. But Commissioner Williams says that the reduction of major crimes is because of the invaluable work of his officers.
We have to give credit where it is due. COVID does not reduce or increase crime. Crime is reduced based on how we as a society, as well as the police, respond to it. Because the police cannot take all the credit at the end of the day, because the police are only one element that has to address the issue of crime.
91 of the persons murdered in 2020 were males, and 69 of the murders occurred in urban areas. 8 of the murders were committed with a firearm, and the motives for the majority of the murders were drug and gang-related and retaliation. The issue of crime is more pronounced in Belize City's south side, where multiple gangs operate. On the south side of the old capital, gang members are bred to be drug runners and killers. They are forced into the gang life, and if they resist, they become a target, like 24-year-old Raheem Gordon. He escaped the second attempt on his life last year.
I tell people back here that's something else. They're not jealous. And my son don't hang with them. They want to be gang bangers in there. Yeah, no kind of gang, no kind of gang. No, as far as I know, no kind of gang.
Any beef with anybody, any other boys in the area?
No, not at all. Only PIV got beef with my son for very reason I do not know. I know no gang bangers. None at all.
The issue of crime has to be addressed holistically. Key facets of society must meet and engage in a collaborative effort to address the root causes of crime. Addressing the issue starts within the family. There have been attempts, but most have been futile, and the gang culture within Southside Belize City continues to exist.
We must have the the input of the society. We must have the input of other government agencies as well as non-government agencies. We must have the input of families, because families do have a significant impact on these young men who are out there hunting each other with a view to kill themselves. Oftentimes, the response that these young men get is not what would be more conducive to preventing them from becoming a gang member. And sometimes the environment within which they live itself is one that promotes one thing or encourages them to do one thing, but to be a gang member, unless they're so strong-minded and they're so determined that, you know what, even though I am from this gang-ridden area, I'm going to make a difference.
But being different in a gang-ridden area can spell trouble for a young man. But like the commissioner said, if they are serious, these young men can live different lives. An organization like the CYDP and its mentorship program can make it possible. And if that becomes a reality, the success will be reflected in the crime figures. Reporting for News 5, Hipólito Novello.
Former Minister of Works Rene Montero has been accused of engaging in shady land deals, among other allegations of misuse of resources. Since late last year, former chairman of Buena Vista Village, Eddie De La Rosa, who was one of Montero's closest operatives, alleged that Montero was engaged in these activities while he was a sitting government minister. Last week, the new Minister of Natural Resources, Cordell Hyde, said they have documents to prove it. These documents reportedly show that Montero's associates were carrying out land transactions where they would put land in persons' names by using their personal information, just that these persons didn't know about the scheme. Later, the lands would reportedly be transferred to those closest to Montero, including family and political associates. Today, we asked Minister responsible for police, Karim Musa, about what happens next. Will police action be taken against Montero? Here's what he had to say.
That is something that, as minister, I am completely staying out of. This is not going to be any political witch hunt the way you saw like the last administration. But we cannot ignore the fact that declarations have been made by individuals, very credible declarations have been made and presented to our ministry. I believe that those will be converted into police statements, and the police will be investigating those matters. We have to take it seriously like any other offense. And so while it is as minister, I personally will have absolutely no involvement in overseeing the carriage of those matters. I am aware that those are being put in the form of police statements, and if action is to be taken, action will be taken.
Did Commissioner Williams go too far in reprimanding the cop who pulled him over during curfew hours? Today, the Compul's boss, Minister Musa, sounded off on last week's leaked recording. In the recording, Williams is heard telling the officer that he can be on the streets when and how he wants, among other colorful languages. So should Compul Williams face disciplinary action for the way he communicated with the cop? Minister Musa tells us what he thinks of the recording.
I have heard the leaked audio, and what I can say is that it is very unfortunate, the choice of language per se, but in any department, whether it's police, whether it's BDF, there will always be this type of, if in situations where there is this feeling of insubordination, that there would be disciplinary communication coming from the higher ranking officer. And so this is normal. Obviously, I would not have chosen those particular words to use, but I have a difficulty assessing a situation whereby you only hear one side of the story. Obviously, the recording was spliced, it was cut, and you only hear the part where the commissioner is actually saying something. So what led the commissioner to that point? We need to hear that portion. What did the officer tell his superior to get him so upset? I always remind members of the police department, especially the high rank, that we are living in an age of technology, and so we have to assume that in every situation you would possibly be recorded. Everything, whether it's video, whether it's audio, there is that possibility. And so you have to be very careful and choose your words wisely. But again, that is something internal. If you're asking me if any disciplinary action will be taken against the commissioner, absolutely not. None will be taken against him.
Still to come, new requirements to travel to the U.S.
It's a fact that you can access a
Trabaje desde casa si puede. No visite a nadie que esté enfermo, en cuarentena o en aislamiento. Mejor, llámelos por teléfono. Protejamos nuestra salud.
The United States of America has a new president. This morning, President Joe Biden took his oath as the 46th President of the United States of America. Alongside him was Kamala Harris, who became the 49th Vice President and the first woman and woman of color to ascend to national office and hold the post of Vice President. The audience for today's ceremony was limited due to health precautions, and still in attendance were former presidents of the United States Barack Obama, George W. Bush, and Bill Clinton. One person who did not attend Biden's inauguration was former President Donald Trump, who during his term became a polarizing figure dividing the U.S. The one-term president was the first president to be impeached twice. During his term, Trump made several executive orders and held a strong stance on immigration. He pulled the U.S. out of the Paris Accord and the World Health Organization. In his first 100 days, President Biden has committed to reverse several of these decisions.
So here's my message to those beyond our borders. America has been tested, and we've come out stronger for it. We will repair our alliances and engage with the world once again, not to meet yesterday's challenges, but today's and tomorrow's challenges. And we'll lead not merely by the example of our power, but by the power of our example. We'll be a strong and trusted partner for peace, progress, and security. Look, you all know we've been through so much in this nation. And in my first act as president, I'd like to ask you to join me in a moment of silent prayer. Remember all those who we lost in this past year to the pandemic, those 400,000 fellow Americans, moms, dads, husbands, wives, sons, daughters, friends, neighbors, and co-workers. We'll honor them by becoming the people and the nation we know we can and should be.
All eyes are on the north, not just for the major political changes, but also for temperature drops. Tourism players are eyeing travel trends of Americans as the frigid winter weather sets in. Belize is one of many countries struggling to revive its tourism industry amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. The reopening of the sector in the last quarter of 2020 allowed a few thousand tourists to visit the country. But it isn't enough for the industry's revival. President of the Belize Hotel Association, Ted Tejada, says there is hope that more tourists will flock to Belize for the warmer days with the cold weather battering the U.S.
We see when we opened the airport in October, there was about 3,000 tourists that actually came to the country of Belize. In November, we did see that number doubled. It went to about 7,000. December, we haven't received the numbers, but that I heard there was a buzz in San Pedro, there was a buzz in Placencia, in Kikaker. We saw a lot more tourists coming. January, there's a slowdown, but we hear that there's been blizzards in the United States. I mean, I spoke to someone in Canada that they had 90-kilometer winds at -0 degrees. I mean, this is the time when the North American traveler is thinking, I gotta get out of here. It's too cold. I mean, your skin peels in 3 minutes. So they are looking to go somewhere where they don't have to be having a jacket and a toque. So this is the perfect time for them to travel to Belize.
I'm sure people in your positions are hopeful that we get the vaccines as soon as possible.
That is correct. So that's another area that the Belize Hotel Association is going to explore with its members. How do we come as an association, as stakeholders, and contribute a little bit out of every room that we get towards a vaccine? I think if all Belizeans are able to get vaccinated, then we can open the market and invite anyone.
And for Belizeans who are interested in travel to the United States, the U.S. Embassy issued its travel advisory detailing the new CDC's requirements for persons wanting to enter the U.S. As of January 26, all airline passengers traveling to the U.S. ages 2 years and older will be asked to provide a negative COVID-19 viral test taken within 3 days before traveling. The embassy advisory states that you can also provide positive test results and documentation from a licensed healthcare provider of having recovered from COVID-19 in the 90 days preceding travel. All passengers will also be required to attest to having received a negative result or to recovery from COVID-19. The U.S. government is asking all airlines to deny boarding to passengers who do not meet these requirements. U.S. citizens who would be able to meet these requirements are advised to depart the country they're in immediately or prepare to be unable to return to the United States until they meet the requirement. To assist travelers, the Belize Tourism Board has announced that same-day testing will be available at Philip Golson International Airport for any departing passengers. Those wishing to be tested before they travel can also visit several health clinics where they have tests for a fee. The Belize Hotel Association is also working with its members to provide testing at the hotels for tourists. When we come back, Belize says thank you to the Cuban Medical Brigade.
Research
We are stronger together. The Belize Bank, our country, your bank.
It's been 10 months since they arrived in Belize, and today a ceremony was held to say thank you and farewell. Members of the Henry Reeve Brigade arrived in Belize on March 25th of last year to assist the country with its response efforts to the COVID-19 pandemic. 59 Cuban health professionals have been working around the clock in health facilities across the country. A small ceremony was held today where Minister of Health and Wellness Michelle Shabat expressed the country's appreciation for Cuba's help during this pandemic.
You have been providing services to the Belizean people since March of this year, of the past year, when the pandemic started to affect us. I cannot emphasize strongly enough what a decisive moment for public health these times are. We face many challenges, some that at times may have seemed to be unsurmountable. The Ministry of Health and Wellness and by extension, the people and government of Belize, owe all of you a debt of gratitude. You came to assist us when there were many uncertainties surrounding this COVID-19 disease, and your support has never faltered. The great work that the Henry Reeve Brigade does has been recognized throughout the world, and your nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize is a testament to that. Muchas felicidades.
And that's the news. Tonight's broadcast is available in both text and streaming video at channel5belize.com. You can also connect with us on our Facebook page at News 5 Live. I'm Marlene Cuellar. Thanks for joining us. And from all of us here at News 5, please remember to wash your hands, keep your social distance, and stay safe. Good night.